Maybe we can read this introduction before. Dasa Vrindavanam Vande Krishna Dasa Prabhum Tata Janavatar Chaitanya Leela Vishtar Kadino Dronityananda Padabja Karunarena Bhushito Vyaktachano Burachincho Bhavande Vyasadupino Shri Guru Gaur Gandharva Govindascha Ganaisaha Jayanti Patakascha Sarvesham Karunartino. So we are reading from Ch.Ch. Charitamrita and starting from the beginning, and I would like to read this introduction by Srila Swami Marsh Prabhupada. And it says here, this was originally delivered as 5 morning lectures on the Chaitanya Charitamrita in New York City, April 10th to 14th, 1967. So let's read this. Jai Shri Gurudev. The word Chaitanya means living force. Charit means character, and Amrita means immortal. As living entities we can move, but a table cannot because it does not possess living force. Movement and activity may be considered signs or symptoms of the living force. Indeed, it may be said that there can be no activity without the living force. Although the living force is present in the material condition, this condition is not Amrita, immortal. The words Chaitanya Charitamrita then may be translated as the character of the living force in immortality. So, this name, Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are some layers of meaning, right? And on one level, it means the nectarian nature of Lord Chaitanya, because Chaitanya, as we know, is one of the names of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Gauranga Sundar, the sannyas name, right? Nimai Pandit, Nimai of Nadia. And then Charit is a word that is used, and it doesn't exactly translate into English perfectly, but it means it's used, it means like character, as Srila Swami Marsh says here, but there's a broader range of meaning. It also refers to like the life, the history of a particular individual, at least in the usage that I've heard. So like, for example, in Bhagavatam, the section in Bhagavatam which is describing the Leela of Prahlad Maharaj, it's sometimes referred to as Prahlad Charit. Like the story of Prahlad, the character, the nature of Prahlad, the history of Prahlad, like that. There's some range of meaning. And I believe also I've heard Gurudev mention, refer to Dhruva Charit, about Dhruva Maharaj. So you could also say, as it's put here, the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Charit, could say, refers to the life, the character, the Leela of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Amrita, everybody knows, what does Amrita mean? Sí, ¿qué conoce Amrita? Does that make sense?
¿Qué significa Amrita?
¿Qué significa? No sabe? Means nectar. Nectar. So the nectar of the life, of the divine life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is one way you could understand this, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. But Swami Marsh Prabhupada is giving this other layer of meaning, that in a broader sense, Chaitanya simply refers to Chaitan, means consciousness. So Chaitanya means consciousness or life force, living force, as Swami Marsh is saying here. And then, Charit, what is the nature, what is the character of the life force? And in what circumstances? In Amrita. Amrita también significa Eternidad, eternity, a double meaning. So Amrita also means eternity. So we have some experience in this world. What is the nature of consciousness in contact with what is mortal, with what is subject to death, right? We have experience of like God, do we have experience? Like what it's like to suffer under the influence of the material energy, right? In the temporary world, in the world of death. We have some experience of that here, right? But what is the nature of the life force in contact with the eternal plane? What is the nature of the eternal life of the soul? We haven't experienced that. We've heard something about it. And this is also indicated in, this concept is also indicated in Prapana Jivanamrita. It's the same thing. Prapana means surrendered soul. You know this book, right? Prapana Jivanam. Maybe you did you read it before? No. You read, yeah. So you know that book. So Prapana refers to the surrendered soul. And Jiva means the living entity. Amrita, the same. So the life of the surrendered soul in immortality, or the immortal life of the surrendered soul. And so what is the nature of the soul, the surrendered soul? What is the nature of the soul in a life of surrender within the eternal world? And there's also a key there, because actually you can only enter that eternal world, that positive eternal world, if you are prapana, if you are surrendered. So there's some clue there in the title. You can only live an immortal life if you are prapana, if you are sharanagata, if you are surrendered. Otherwise, as long as we're still following our life of selfishness, right? Our life of secondary interest, then we have to come down to this world of mortality. Not immortality, but mortality, right? And also in Srila Sridhar Maharaj's introduction, he explores this idea, and he points out, generally religious views, they neglect this concept. Like, what is the nature of the soul in immortality, right? Okay, there's a general idea, we live a mortal life, we live a temporary life, we want to get out of this, we want to leave this world and go to the higher world. But what is the nature of that world? We don't hear very much. Just to be immortal doesn't have so much value. There can be a stone that is immortal, a mountain may be immortal. But just to live in existence for time, for all time, what is really the value of that? There must be some progressive life, some positive life. And that is only possible in the plane of devotion, the plane of surrender, love, dedication. So what do we learn? What is one of the primary things we learn in the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He's showing the example of the life of a surrendered soul in devotion, in the immortal plane. What will that look like? What does somebody like that look? How do they talk? How do they move? How do they behave? How do they think? Mahaprabhu is showing us that. Krishna coming as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to show us how to be the best lover of Krishna, how to be the best devotee of Krishna. Mahaprabhu is showing that. Krishna himself is showing that in this world for our benefit. So the words Chaitanya Charitamrita then may be translated as the character of the living force in immortality. Very nice. But how is this living force displayed immortally? It is not displayed by man or any other creature in this material universe, for none of us are immortal in these bodies. We possess the living force, we perform activities, and we are immortal by our nature and constitution. But the material condition into which we have been put does not allow our immortality to be displayed. Very nice. So our immortal nature is being shackled, is being tied down, because we are identifying with the temporary plane. Only because of what we are identifying with, right? That has brought us down. But if we let go of that, then we can fly free in the eternal world. It is stated in the Katha Upanishad that eternality and the living force belong to both ourselves and God. Although this is true in that both God and ourselves are immortal, there is a difference. As living entities, we perform many activities, but we have a tendency to fall down into material nature. God has no such tendency. So we are vulnerable, right? We have that weakness, that we have that tendency, that propensity to come down to a lower nature. Now, we are the Tatastha Shakti, right? So, and we are very, very tiny. And so our nature, although qualitatively speaking, we are superior to the material nature, quantitatively speaking, we are inferior. We are far less. And so we have this propensity to come under the influence of a greater power. And that may be either the superior material energy, Swarup Shakti, or the lower Maya Shakti, right? So we are that small percentage who came down under the cloak of the Maya Shakti. So we have the tendency to fall down into material nature, but God has no such tendency. Being all-powerful, he never comes under the control of material nature. Indeed, material nature is but one display of his inconceivable energies. An analogy will help us understand the distinction between ourselves and God. From the ground, we may only see clouds in the sky, but if we fly above the clouds, we can see the sun shining. From the sky, skyscrapers and cities seem very tiny. Similarly, from God's position, this entire material creation is insignificant. The tendency of the living entity is to come down from the heights where everything can be seen in perspective. God, however, does not have this tendency. The Supreme Lord is not subject to fall down into illusion, Maya, any more than the sun is subject to fall beneath the clouds. So this analogy is actually very helpful, and it's something you experience in a very dramatic way when you're flying, right? I've experienced it a number of times. Maybe on the ground it's a rainy, cloudy day, and then you go up in the plane and you see, oh, the sun is shining above. You go above the clouds and you see the sun is shining, right? It's very, very striking. One shift, momentary shift, everything's dramatically different, right? So we are under the clouds of that material energy, right? That if we can go above those clouds, we will see the sun is shining. It all depends on where our consciousness is directed, right? Impersonalist philosophers, Mayavadis, maintain that both the living entity and God himself are under the control of Maya when they come into this material world. This is the fallacy of their philosophy. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should therefore not be considered one of us. He is Krishna himself, the supreme living entity, and as such he never comes under the cloud of Maya. Krishna, his expansions, and even his higher devotees never fall into the clutches of illusion. Lord Chaitanya came to earth simply to preach Krishna Bhakti, love of Krishna. In other words, he is Lord Krishna himself, teaching the living entities the proper way to approach Krishna. He is like a teacher who, seeing a student doing poorly, takes up a pencil and writes, saying, "Do it like this, A, B, C." From this, one should not foolishly think that the teacher is learning his ABCs. That's a good analogy. Similarly, although Lord Chaitanya appears in the guise of a devotee, we should not foolishly think he is an ordinary human being. We should always remember that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, God himself, teaching us how to become Krishna conscious, and we must study him in that light. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, "Give up all your nonsense and surrender to me." Swami Marsh is very funny sometimes. He says, it's not exactly what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. He's paraphrasing. "Give up all your nonsense and surrender to me. I will protect you." We say, "Oh, surrender, but I have so many responsibilities. How can I surrender right now?" That reminds me of that occasion when Srila Sridhar Maharaj, it was before he took initiation, and he was still like visiting the Gaudiya Math and hearing from Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur, but hadn't like made full commitment yet. And then this one time after Gaur Purnima, he heard, you know this story, it's very famous. He heard Srila Saraswati Thakur speaking with people who were leaving. They'd come for the festival like 1 week, and then they're going home. This is in Mayapur. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj heard Saraswati Thakur saying, "Don't cheat me." And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was very surprised. Why is he saying, "Don't cheat me"? They came for the festival, and now they're going home. What is the problem? And he went closer, and Saraswati Thakur explained. He said, "You all came here, and you made a promise that you will serve Krishna. And now you are going home. You're going to forget that promise. And you will say to me, 'Oh, I have some fire in my home, some fire burning in my home. I have to put it out, and then I will come back.' And then Saraswati Thakur said, 'But then I will say to you, even if the whole world is on fire, nothing is more important than this. All of your needs can be met only in the service of Krishna.'" So the Mahaprabhu, our gurus, the Vaishnavas, they are inviting us, come and sarvadharmam prityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up everything, come surrender unto our sweet Lord. "Oh, but I have to do this and I have to do that, this and I have that. I have so many things." But this is Saraswati Thakur said, even if the whole world is on fire, even if everything's going to hell, nothing is more important than this. And Maya, illusion, says to us, "Don't do it or you'll be out of my clutches. Just stay in my clutches and I'll kick you." It is a fact that we are constantly being kicked, because this is what is so funny about this world, right? The pleasure, the enticing nature of this world, that there are many attractive things and you can get some enjoyment, but behind you're also being kicked, right? You can have so many nice things, but then so many headaches also, so much trouble comes along with that. You can be a billionaire, And then you're always worried about losing your money, and you're worried about so many business problems and so many employees, and there's no free ride in this world. You have to pay for everything. It is a fact that we are constantly being kicked by Maya, just as the male ass is kicked in the face by the she-ass when she comes for sex. Ass means a donkey. You don't know. Similarly, cats and dogs are always fighting and whining when they have sex. Even an elephant in the jungle is caught by the use of a trained she-elephant who leads him into a pit. We should learn by observing these tricks of nature. Maya has many ways to entrap us, and her strongest shackle is the female. Of course, in actuality, we are neither male nor female, for these designations refer only to the outer dress, the body. We are all actually Krishna's servants. But in conditioned life, we are shackled by iron chains. Thus, everyone is bound by sex, and therefore one who wishes to gain liberation from the material clutches must first learn to control the sex urge. Unrestricted sex puts one fully in the clutches of illusion. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu officially renounced this illusion at the age of 24, although his wife was 16 and his mother 70, and he was the only male in the family. Although he was a Brahmin and was not rich, he took sannyas, the renounced order of life, and thus extricated himself from family entanglement. If we wish to become fully Krishna conscious, we have to give up the shackles of Maya. Or if we remain within Maya, we should live in such a way that we will not be subjects to illusion, as did the many householders among Lord Chaitanya's closest associates. So, Swami Marsh is saying, it's not necessary to give up worldly life. Some practitioners need to live in the world, right? But if you are doing so, try to navigate in a careful way so you don't become weighed down by this heavy energy. From the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we learn how Lord Chaitanya taught people to break the shackles of Maya and become immortal. Thus, as mentioned above, the title may be properly translated as the character of the living force in immortality. The supreme living force is the supreme personality of Godhead. He is also the supreme entity. There are innumerable living entities, and all of them are individuals. This is very easy to understand. We are all individual in our thoughts and desires, and the Supreme Lord is also an individual person. He is different, though, in that he is the leader, the one whom no one can excel. Among the minute living entities, one being can excel another in one capacity or another. Like each of these living entities, the Lord is an individual, but he is different in that he is the supreme individual. God is also infallible, and thus in the Bhagavad Gita he is addressed as Achyuta, which means he who never falls down. This name is appropriate because in the Bhagavad Gita Arjuna falls into illusion, but Krishna does not. Krishna himself reveals his infallibility when he says to Arjuna, "When I appear in this world, I do so by my own internal potency." Thus, we should not think that Krishna is overpowered by the material potency when he is in the material world. Neither Krishna nor his incarnations ever come under the control of material nature. They are totally free. Indeed, in Srimad Bhagavatam, one who has a godly nature is actually defined as one who is not affected by the modes of nature, although in material nature. The real question is, how can we remain unpolluted by material contamination while in the material world? So this is the key, right? We are living in the world, and also we cannot just go hide in caves, right? And most persons need to work to take care of their families, take care of their bodies, their health, have responsibilities. So this is as Swami Marsh says here, Prabhupada says, what is the real question is this: how can we be in the world and not be in the world, right, at the same time? How can we remain unpolluted by material contamination while in the material world? Okay. I'm going to end there. No, I'm joking. End on a cliffhanger. Tune in tomorrow. Srila Rupa Goswami explains that we can remain uncontaminated. This is the $1 million question. That we can remain uncontaminated while in the world if we simply make it our ambition to serve Krishna. One may then justifiably ask, how can I serve? So this is the only way to survive in the material world, is to connect everything with Krishna's service, sweet service, to shift our consciousness. We cannot renounce. It is very unnatural. It is not the nature of the soul to reject, to renounce, to give up. The real nature of the soul is to do, to act, to love. The nature of the soul is not to detach, but to attach, right? So this is the secret. Not to reject the material world, to spit on the material world, as we see sometimes, but to see everything in connection with Krishna. Actually, there's nothing wrong with anything here. It is only our own vision which makes it wrong. It is the filter of selfishness that makes it wrong. The filter of our individual interest, that is what makes it wrong. But if we see everything through the filter of Krishna's service, of the service of Krishna's devotees, then everything becomes beautiful. Everything becomes perfect. We don't need to be afraid of the material world, and we don't need to hide from the material world. We don't need to be angry with the material world. We simply have to adjust our own vision, our own consciousness. One may then justifiably ask, how can I serve? It is not simply a matter of meditation, which is just an activity of the mind, but of performing practical work for Krishna. In such work, we should leave no resource unused. Whatever is there, whatever we have, should be used for Krishna. We can use everything: typewriters, automobiles, airplanes, missiles. Missiles, he said. I wonder what Srila Prabhupada was thinking. But it's true, like the theory is there. Of course, it may be a very rare circumstance, but the theory is true, that everything can be used. If we simply speak to people about Krishna consciousness, we are also rendering service. If our mind, senses, speech, money, and energies are thus engaged in the service of Krishna, then we are no longer in material nature. And we were mentioning this verse yesterday, actually. This is, probably Srila Swami Marsh is referring to this. It's a famous verse, and where is it originally? I can't remember. That iha yasya harir dasya karmana manasa gita nikilashvapyavastasu jivan mukta sa uchyate. This phrase is used of jivan mukta. Jivan mukta means the liberated soul living in this world. So it is possible, even in this world, in the midst of all the things of this world, one can be a liberated soul. How? Iha yasya harirtas karmana, by their karma, their activity, manasa, by their mind, gira, by their words, Harir Dasya. And everything is engaged in the service of Hari, the service of our sweet Lord. Then one will be Jivan Mukta. So if our mind, senses, speech, money, and energies are thus engaged in the service of Krishna, then we are no longer in material nature. By virtue of spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, we transcend the platform of material nature. It is a fact that Krishna, his expansions and his devotees, that is, those who work for him, are not in material nature, although people with a poor fund of knowledge think that they are. This reminds me of one incident. It was in the Gaudiya Math, and it was Bhakti Saranga Goswami Marsh. He was a very powerful preacher. And there was some court case going on against the Gaudiya Math for some reason or other. And Bhakti Saranga Goswami, he came from a very high-class family, very high lineage. They were Goswami, high-level Brahmins, line of Nityananda Prabhu, I believe the bloodline of Nityananda Prabhu. And so sometimes he would be used for these kinds of situations, because everyone respected him. And anyway, he was in the court for something, and he was representing the Gaudiya Math, and at one point somebody told him, maybe he was speaking too much, and someone told him, be quiet, listen to the judge, and Goswami Marsh he said, well, maybe I won't say everything that he said. It was very rude. But essentially what he said, the main point of what he said, I am not within the jurisdiction of this judge. I don't care what the judge thinks. Like very boldly in this courtroom, he said, we are in the jurisdiction of Krishna. We don't care what this judge thinks. We are in another jurisdiction. And everyone was very shocked, and they won the case in the end, So it is a very interesting thing that one can be in this world, but if all their activity, all their thought, their consciousness is regulated in connection with a higher plane, then they're not living in this world. And that was something we saw in the person of our Guru Dev in a very tangible way. Here, he was here, but he wasn't here. An extraordinary thing to see. The Chaitanya Charitamrita teaches that the spirit soul is immortal and that our activities in the spiritual world are also immortal. The Mayavadis, who hold the view that the Absolute is impersonal and formless, contends that a realized soul has no need to talk. But the Vaishnavas, because their idea, right, the Mayavadis, the impersonalists, their whole emphasis is on renunciation, right, and speaking is a material, useless thing, right, that in the liberated state there won't be any need to talk or to do anything. But the Vaishnavas say, no, there's nothing wrong with talking, but let's talk about Krishna. Let's talk about beautiful things. Let's talk about meaningful things. It's only talking about material things that is useless. That is to be rejected. But talking by itself is a wonderful thing, but use it properly. Everything is like that. If you have a knife, you can use it to kill somebody. You can also use it to make a wonderful feast, food preparation. So everything is fine. But how we will use it, that is the question. So the Mayavadis, who hold the view that the Absolute is impersonal and formless, contends that a realized soul has no need to talk. But the Vaishnavas, devotees of Krishna, contend that when one reaches the stage of realization, he really begins to talk, he says. This is when you start talking. Previously, we only talked of nonsense, the Vaishnava says. Now let us begin our real talks, talks of Krishna, in support of their view that the self-realized remains silent. The Mayavadis are fond of using the example of the water pot, maintaining that when a pot is not filled with water, it makes a sound, but that when it is filled, it makes no sound. But are we water pots? How can we be compared to them? A good analogy utilizes as many similarities between two objects as possible. A water pot is not an active living force, but we are. Ever silent meditation may be adequate for a water pot, but not for us. Indeed, when a devotee realizes how much he has to say about Krishna, 24 hours in a day are not sufficient. It is the fool who is celebrated as long as he does not speak, for when he breaks his silence, his lack of knowledge is exposed. The Chaitanya Charitamrita shows that there are many wonderful things to discover by glorifying the Supreme. So this is, this thing about silence, it is kind of like a big deal in the how do we say, like generic spirituality world, Mona, right? And in America there are many retreats, right? People will pay to be silent. Like, you can't make this stuff up. There are also places where you'll pay a lot of money to not eat. To go on a water fast, you'll pay for that. So they help you to fast, they help you to not speak. So, we can appreciate this idea, right? Because people realize how exhausting it is to talk all the time. Why? Because we talk about meaningless things, right? We get exhausted using devices, right? Engaging the engagement with devices, phones, laptops, etc. It's really like a materialization of the mental plane, right? The mental plane is tangibly engaging through the medium of these devices, right? And it becomes exhausting because our own minds, the patterns of our own mind, the useless things in our minds like to contemplate, are all useless and meaningless and exhausting. And all the useless things that we like, because we're just chewing on useless things and meaningless things. It's like a machine that's moving. It gets very tiring. It's exhausting. You're chewing on something that has no juice. There's nothing there. So it gets very tiring. So then people want to take a break and they'll pay a few $100s or a few $1,000s so that they can stop talking. It gets very exhausting. But the issue is not the talking. The issue is what you're talking about. If we shift that to talk about something meaningful, about something beautiful, then it all changes. You'll be flying. There will be no exhaustion there. There's some purpose, behind the talking, some meaning behind. And genuine sweetness. In the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami writes, I offer my respects to my spiritual masters. So this is the first line, Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktam, which we are coming to. And this is interesting, the phrase Vande Gurun, because it doesn't say Guru. Gurun is plural, right? Guru is singular. So there's a plurality of gurus which is being appreciated here. Where are we? So he writes, I offer my respects to my spiritual masters. He uses the plural here to indicate the disciplic succession. He offers his obeisances not to his spiritual master alone, but to the whole parampara, the chain of disciplic succession, beginning with Lord Krishna himself. Thus the author addresses the Guru in the plural to show the highest respect for all his predecessor spiritual masters. After offering obeisances to the disciplic succession, the author pays obeisance to all other devotees, to the Lord himself, to his incarnations, to the expansions of Godhead, and to the manifestation of Krishna's internal energy. So right off the bat, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you understand, we are being presented with a very sophisticated view of the nature of reality, right? It's not some simplified kindergarten version, right, of who is God, But this is like a real approach, just like if you're approaching someone in this world, what does it mean to get to know someone in this world? If you just know them, that's a very isolated, limited view. But if you're really getting to know someone, who are their parents, who are their siblings, who are their neighbors, who are their co-workers, who's their boss at work, what do they do at work, right? So anyone in this world, they have a whole system, a whole paraphernalia that surrounds them. So it is just common sense. It is all, Krishna consciousness is so much common sense, right? So this type of detail we find only here. We find only in these teachings. So the very first verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's also showing the proper mood of devotion, that I'm offering my respects. It's not only me and God. It's not just me and Krishna or me and Mahaprabhu, but if I want a real relationship with Krishna, with the Lord, that means I also have to honor all the people who are surrounding him. Those who are already dear, those who are already close to the Lord, I must honor them also. It is a realistic and humble, genuine approach. So he's offering obeisances to Guru and first Guru, right? The first line of Chaitanya Charitamrita is not, it's not obeisances to Mahaprabhu, actually, to Guru, to our Guru who gives us Mahaprabhu. So that's another interesting point. So first offers obeisance to all his Gurus, then to all the devotees, then to the Lord, then to the incarnations of the Lord, the expansions of the Lord, and to the manifestation of the Lord Shakti, internal energy. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sometimes called Krishna Chaitanya, is the embodiment of all of these. He is God, Guru, devotee, incarnation, internal energy, and expansion of God. So this is another point here, that from one perspective, everything is one, right? The Mayavadis the impersonalists don't have it completely wrong, right? From one perspective, everything is one, and this is known as Advaya Gyan Tattva, that view of the absolute nature of everything. Jai Shri Guru Varanga Sundar Radha Giridharicha. And that analogy is given, right, of the sun and the rays of the sun in regards to the relationship between the Lord and the living entities of this world. So everything in existence is a manifestation of either Krishna directly or one of his energies. Right? So even we are a part of Krishna's energies, right? We are one of Krishna's energies. So everything is Krishna from a simplified view, everything is Krishna, you could say. Should I stop there, Dee? You usually end at 8, is it? Okay, we'll stop there. It's very nice to read the introduction. And Gurudev mentioned when you start a book, it's good to read the introduction. So we're happily honoring Gurudev's disciple. Very, very nice to be. Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki Jai, Shri Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami ki Jai, Shri A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Marsh Prabhupada ki Jai. The Gurudev ki Jai, Param Gurudev ki Jai, Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Should we sing Hari Hara Krishna? Jai.
Jai.